The series begins with a woman named Zinle. We see her getting ready and putting on makeup. Then we see Angela, a journalist, at Don Bengo's party. Don Bengo is known as the owner of the largest cosmetics company in the world. Angela talks about the future of the cosmetics company. After that, we see Don Bengo in the car with his wife, Grace, and his second wife, Thando. It becomes clear that Grace is in control of everything, even Thando, who we learn had a miscarriage before. Because of this, Grace doesn't let Don Bengo divorce her. He can't marry another woman and have children with her. She is certain that Thando won't be able to have children again. We then see Zinle getting ready for the show because she is the face of Don Bengo's company. Zinle applies makeup to herself before anyone sees her, revealing that she wants to hide something on her face. When Don Bengo arrives at the party, he is greeted by his daughter, Linda, who we learn organized the event. We discover that Linda wants to gain her father's approval by any means necessary to become his successor. Grace gets upset when her children, Fila and Endo, arrive late. Grace plans for Fila to become the successor after his father. Don Bengo announces Zinle as the new face of the company, saying she reached this position based on public votes. Zinle appears and impresses everyone present. Suddenly, an image of her with a lighter skin tone appears on the screen, causing a stir, and everyone starts talking about the incident. Linda becomes very flustered and tries to defend herself in front of her father, but he refuses to listen to her. Later, Endo drives Zinle home, and she tells him that the driver was supposed to take her, but he insists and tries to comfort her about what happened. However, Zinle isn't interested and leaves him to go to her room. We learn that she is staying at Don Bengo's house, who returns home very upset. Grace instructs everyone not to talk to the press. Zinle asks Grace if she can visit her cousin the next day to attend a spiritual session, but Grace refuses and tells her that he isn't her brother. The next day, Zinle enters Thando's room and gives her some chocolate, thanking her for being her friend. Thando is pleased and tells her that she will get used to the place soon. Zinle then asks Thando how she feels about being a second wife, which upsets Thando, who advises against it. During this time, Don Bengo gets ready and leaves to go to the company under the pretext of fixing what happened at the party. He rejects Grace's suggestion to go to a spa resort. It becomes clear that Don Bengo is lying to his wife because he is visiting Ruby's much younger mistress. Don Bengo experiences a heart attack during their encounter, terrifying Ruby, who quickly calls for an ambulance. We see Endo offering Zinle to go out for lunch somewhere, but she refuses because she knows he likes her. After a while, Grace receives news that her husband has been admitted to the hospital. She rushes there with her children and Linda. They find out from the doctor that Don Bengo is in surgery. Grace warns everyone present not to spread the news as she's worried about the company's reputation. She asks Fila to talk to the employees, prevent them from leaking the news. When Zinle learns about the situation, she quickly goes to the hospital with food. However, Grace asks her to go back home and forbids her from talking to anyone about what happened. Zinle agrees, but as soon as she leaves, she sends a message to the press informing them. Fila returns to the hospital and tells his mother that his father wasn't at the company. We see Linda in distress. Thando follows her to console her, promising that her father will be okay. But Linda is worried about what will happen to her, saying that she has no one but her father and that he is her only family. At this moment, Linda sees the news about her father being in the hospital. They don't know who leaked the information. After the surgery, Don Bengo's wife and children visit him. Linda begs him to stay alive because she has no one else. When they all leave, Zinle, who had been hiding in the room, comes out and tries to kill Don Bengo. At the same time, Linda realizes she forgot her phone and re-enters the room, causing Zinle to panic and hide at the last moment. When Grace returns home and finds Zinle, she asks if she was the one who leaked the news. Zinle lies and says her phone was off. Grace agrees to let her visit her cousin. The next day, Grace is shocked to learn that her husband had been cheating on her. Linda visits her father in the hospital, accompanied by her mother, Don Bengo's first wife. At this time, Bonga, who we learn is her brother, not her cousin, joins them in the spiritual session for their deceased sister. Grace goes to the hospital and is surprised to see Linda's mother. She wants to make her leave, claiming she is giving Don Bengo unhealthy food, but Don Bengo embarrasses her in front of them. Linda is very pleased, and when she and her mother leave, Don Bengo talks to Grace and Thando, informing them that he will marry again to have children. Grace is shocked, but Thando is happy because she will finally get a divorce from him. Grace decides to visit Ruby at her house and forces her to take a pregnancy test to confirm if she is pregnant or not. We go back to Zinle, who remembers when her sister suddenly fell ill. She tells her brother what happened and confesses that she wanted to kill Don Bengo. Bonga reassures her that she is not a killer. Zinle tells him she wants to keep Don Bengo alive so he can witness them destroy everything he built. She asks her brother if he brought the gun she had asked for. Bonga gets worried about her, but Zinle is determined because she wants to use it if anything happens to her. When she returns home, she finds Endo sitting alone. She sits with him and looks at the photos he took. He tells her how he used to imitate his brother in everything until he had an accident. Since then, he decided to live a meaningful life. Xinlei admires his thinking but leaves him and goes to her room. When Don Bengo is discharged from the hospital, he visits Ruby. He's surprised to find her packing her bags to leave. She tells him that she can't continue with him because he is much older than her and she doesn't want to waste her life. We find out that Grace had asked Ruby to say this after scaring her with the idea of marrying Don Bengo just to have children, making her the third wife with no real importance. Grace did this after confirming that Ruby was not pregnant. At home, we see Grace asking Xinla to come to her room to fix her makeup. Xinla overhears Grace talking to her son, expressing her surprise at how Xinla won the competition they held, as she doesn't meet their beauty standards. Fila tells her that Xinla is beautiful and well-liked. Xinla feels embarrassed, and when she goes to her room, she takes out the shirt that her sister was wearing when she died. At that time, Xinla promised her sister that she would get revenge on those who wronged her and get justice. She then takes out the gun she has and hides it. She removes the makeup from her face, revealing all the marks. It becomes clear that her face is scarred like her brother Bonga's. We go back in time and see a little girl looking at herself and finding her face disfigured. Xinla wakes up from the nightmare, revealing that she was that little girl. She gets ready and goes down to have breakfast with the family. Don Bengo asks his children to gather because he has something important to discuss. Grace asks Xinli to leave, and she agrees, but stands at a distance to listen in. Xinli learns that Don Bengo plans to announce his successor. He asks Linda and Fila to prepare as he will visit them at their offices. Xinla calls her brother and tells him that she has a plan to turn the succession issue in their favor. They need to make Don Bengo choose Linda so they can reveal what they know about her. Grace gets worried and asks her son to prepare very well. Fila reassures her, saying he has been preparing his whole life to become the CEO and that Linda has no chance against him. Endo is pleased when his mother asks him to oversee Xinli's photo session. Grace then talks to her husband, praising their son and saying he is very smart and knowledgeable about cosmetics. Don Bengo tells her that he must be fair to his children and that the decision is his alone. Grace asks him about his new wife. Don Bengo replies that there is no new bride at the moment and that he is not foolish, making Grace realize that her husband has discovered what she did. Kondo is shocked to learn that Don Bengo will not remarry, that she will not get a divorce. Meanwhile, Xinlei is at the company. Endo informs her that he will oversee the photo session. Fila overhears his sister practicing her speech to their father and tells her she should just be herself. Linda silences him and says they should each act their own way because they are not a team. At that moment, their father is in his office. When Linda enters, he asks her why he should choose her as his successor. Linda responds that she only got to know him as an adult because she didn't live with him, so she understands the meaning of poverty and the necessity of being successful. In contrast, Fila only knows comfort. Comfort harms business. Her father is impressed with her answer. We go to Xinla, who is trying to escape from Endo and the photo session to sneak into Fila's office and plant drugs there. The secretary sees her entering the office, so Xinla lies, saying she wanted to talk to Fila. Fila is surprised to see her standing there. Xinla waits until her father enters the office and finds the drugs, hoping this will make Don Bengo choose Linda. Fila is shocked when he finds the drugs in his office. His father gets furious and scolds him. Fila defends himself, claiming he doesn't use drugs in the office. His father gets even angrier, believing he is still using drugs, and leaves. When Xinlei returns to the photo session, she finds Endo waiting for her, saying he wants to take her pictures. Fila then fights with his sister, thinking she set him up. He doesn't believe her when she denies it and threatens her with the secrets he knows about her. When Fila returns home, his mother blames him, doesn't believe the drugs aren't his. She tries to talk to her husband, promising to stop Fila from using drugs and urging him to choose Fila for the sake of the company because they have educated him well. Don Bengo asks if their son is ready to handle their other business. Grace gets worried and says there's no need for him to know, but her husband insists that both Linda and Fila must learn about their other business before he decides. Grace quickly calls her son to inform him, but he doesn't answer. She sends him a message, but Fila doesn't see it. When he returns home, he and Linda accompany their father to a remote factory. They are puzzled by the place. Their father shows them the product they will be launching in the market, a skin-lightening product. It is revealed that these products are banned in South Africa due to their harmful effects. Fila and Linda are shocked, but Linda agrees to continue her father's work. Fila refuses, unable to believe his family is involved in this business. Meanwhile, Zinl tries to spy on them, but fails. When she returns home, Grace scolds her and grabs her ear for leaving without permission. Zinl then remembers the day Grace and her husband kidnapped her and her siblings for experiments that disfigured their faces and caused their third sister to die of liver cancer due to the experiment. Zinla decides to expose Linda's secrets, revealing that she is in a relationship with Thando, their father's wife. She sends someone who knows Linda to the place where they meet and has her take pictures of them. During this time, Zinla becomes vulnerable and enters into a relationship with Endo. He sees the scar on her face, and Zinla becomes scared and begs him not to tell anyone. Endo reassures her, telling her that she is beautiful regardless. The day of the successor announcement arrives. Don Bengo declares that Linda will be the new CEO. At the same time, a video of her with Thando is released, shocking everyone, especially Don Bengo. Linda tries to defend herself in front of her father while Thando laughs. Grace gets furious and wants to hit Thando, but Fila stops her. Linda thinks Grace and Fila are behind this because she won over Fila and became CEO. Fila defends himself, saying he did nothing, but Linda doesn't believe him and reminds him of his threat. At this moment, Zinle is shocked to see Kolob at the party, the chemist who experimented on them. Zinla panics and drops her glass. She calls her brother, tells him what happened. She then sees Kolob leaving the party and follows him, but Endo stops her, asking her to come inside because it's cold. The next day, Grace scolds her son for knowing about Linda's secret and hiding it. She shows him the newspaper, telling him the news is everywhere. She asks him to support his father because he now has another chance to be the successor. Meanwhile, Thando is in Don Bengo's office to sign the divorce papers. She is very happy, but Don Bengo is upset with her, telling her she will be a nobody once he divorces her. Thando doesn't care and says all she wants is her freedom. He asks for her wedding ring, and she throws it at him and leaves. When she leaves, she meets Zinla and tells her what happened. Zinla is pleased when Thando thinks Grace is behind the videos. Zinla tells Thando she will miss her, and they hug. Don Bengo goes to his daughter's office and asks her to resign from the company and throws her out of the house. Linda cries and tells him he needs to talk to her first, saying she loves and respects him. Her father breaks the picture of them together, says he never liked that picture. Thando packs her clothes, and Grace enters and taunts her, but Thando retorts, calling Grace weak in front of Don Bengo. Grace gets angry and wants to hit her, but Thando holds her hand and says her husband will never love her, then leaves. Endo tries to convince his sister to stay in the house, saying they need to stick together, but Linda insists on leaving. At that moment, Linda suspects someone else might be behind what happened to her, and that Grace might not have exposed her. Thando tells her that there's no one else, because Grace wants her son to be the successor. Meanwhile, Don Bengo asks Grace if she released the video. She tells him that it's not her style, and that she would have handled it quietly with him if she had discovered something. Don Bengo believes her, saying they have enemies. Grace feels humiliated when she tries to get close to him. He rejects her. The next day, Endo goes to the company, and Zinla tries to get the name Kolob from him. She doesn't manage because the secretary calls him, saying his father wants to see him. Don Bengo gathers his family and tells them that an enemy is trying to bring them down. Grace asks them not to talk about what happened to anyone. She then leaves with Endo, so Don Bengo can speak to Fila alone. He asks Fila why he should choose him as his successor. Fila responds that he grew up in the business, saw his father making deals over breakfast, and knows everything about the cosmetics industry. His father then asks about their illegal business. Fila agrees with it, saying it's a matter of supply and demand. Don Bengo is impressed with his answer and agrees to make him the CEO. Meanwhile, Grace talks to Indo and Zinla, asking about their relationship. Zinli tries to deny it, but Indo admits they are in love and assures his mother that their relationship won't affect their work. Indo is surprised when his mother easily accepts their relationship without objection. The next day, Kolob visits Grace at home. We learn that he has admired her for a long time and agreed to work for her husband because of her. Zinli sees them talking and introduces herself to learn his name. After discovering his real name, she calls her brother and asks him to investigate him. Bonga listens to her and follows Kolob to the factory. Meanwhile, Zinle is getting ready to travel with Endo, telling him she's never seen the beach. She is very excited and happy with Endo, showing that she has grown attached to and loves him. Back to Bonga, he successfully enters the factory by tricking the guard, saying he needs to use the bathroom, sees the skin-lightening creams, takes photos, and sends them to his sister. At this time, Grace meets Kolob again and weakens due to her husband's distance. Suddenly, she snaps out of it, yells at Kolob, says she can't cheat on her husband. Kolob tells her that Don Bengo doesn't love her and that he won't wait for her forever. Grace insults him, saying he's wasting his life loving a married woman and that her husband is a real man while he is a nobody. She then leaves him. Later that night, Bonga sneaks into Kolob's house and searches it. He overhears Kolob talking to Don Bengo about moving their factory to China. Meanwhile, Zinle tells Endo about her siblings, but realizes she made a mistake since no one knows she has brothers. She lies, saying it's her cousin, but considers him like a brother. Zinla then sees the video her brother sent and calls him. He informs her that they need to act quickly before they move the factory. Zinla feels guilty towards Endo and decides to break up with him, claiming that they come from different worlds. Endo is shocked, doesn't understand what happened, trying to get answers. However, Zinla doesn't give him a chance and tells him she'll sleep in a different room. Linda watches her father's interview with Grace, becomes more convinced that Grace had nothing to do with the incident. That moment, Linda starts to suspect Zinla. We see Zinli leaving the house, and Don Bengo stops her, grabbing her hand as she walks away. Zinla is terrified, remembering what happened to her as a child, but she controls herself. Don Bengo praises her, saying he saw her photos and asking her to keep up the good work. Zinla leaves without responding. She meets her brother and they agree to burn down the factory, leaving some creams to inform the press and expose them. Bonga notices that his sister isn't well and asks about Endo. She tells him they broke up because she wants to focus on their plan. Bonga says it's good she did that. Zinle returns to the company to continue with their plan. She stands in front of Fila's office, pretending to cry and be distressed. When Fila asks why she's crying, she lies and says it's because of her breakup with Endo, and that she doesn't understand why she's crying since she was the one who broke up with him. Fila asks how he can help, and Zinle says she wants to go out and change the atmosphere, inviting him to a party. She assures him they will have a great time. Fila initially refuses, but eventually agrees. Zinle returns home to get ready. When Endo sees her, tries to talk to her, but Zinle doesn't want to speak. Endo is shocked when he finds out she is going out with his brother. Fila tells him that he's going out with her to ensure no other man gets close to her. Meanwhile, Bonga is watching the factory when Kolob sees him and asks what he's doing there. Bonga lies, saying he's waiting for a friend. Kolob tells him to leave because he can't stay there. Back to Fila, he asks Zinle why she broke up with his brother. She says she doesn't want to talk about it. That night, Bonga sneaks into the factory wearing a mask and burns all the creams without Kolob noticing. He then calls the fire department to report the fire. Zinli is shocked to find drugs with Fila and tries to stop him by any means. We learn that her plan is to make him see the factory burning so the journalists can capture it. She panics when her brother sends her a message asking her to arrive quickly. Zinli convinces Fila not to use the drugs and to keep driving. At the same time, Kolob sees the fire, enters the room with the creams, tries to extinguish the fire, but fails and loses consciousness. At that moment, Bonga sees Kolob and rescues him. Fila arrives at the factory and sees the fire, rushing in and leaving Zinle in the car. She calls the journalists to inform them about the fire. Fila tries to save the creams. Zinle gets out of the car and pretends to help him, intentionally dropping the boxes so the creams become visible for the journalists to photograph. When Fila returns home, he apologizes to his father. Grace tells Zinle to go to a room and not come out. Fila explains what happened to his father, saying he was trying to help and save the business, but his father blames him for confirming their guilt. Fila gets angry, apologizing for not being able to handle his father's criminal empire. Endo is shocked to hear this and tries to understand what happened with Zin, but she doesn't open the door and is very happy watching the news. Linda is surprised to see the news and calls her father, but he doesn't answer. Endo asks his family if what is on the news is true. His father confirms it and says he doesn't have time to listen to it. The next day, Bonga calls Zinle, asking her to visit him quickly because he's in trouble. Zinla pretends to be sick to Endo and says she's going out to see a doctor, refusing to let him accompany her. Endo agrees, but says they need to talk when she returns. Meanwhile, Don Bengo tries to call Kolob, but he doesn't answer. He gets angry at his wife, asking her about what happened between them. It becomes clear that Don Bengo knew about Kolob's feelings for his wife and used those feelings to get his work done. Don Bengo yells at his wife for insulting and shaking Kolob. Grace is shocked and reminds him that she is his wife, but Don Bengo doesn't care. Zinli is surprised when she visits her brother and finds Kolob there. She tells him he can't stay with them. Bonga removes the cloth from Kolob's eyes. Kolob is shocked, saying he knew him from childhood, asks how he survived the fire. We learn that Don Bengo decided to burn the children he experimented on to avoid exposure, but Zinel and her siblings escaped. Back to Don Bengo, he decides to save the project by any means necessary. Grace suggests making Kolob take the blame. Grace gets angry when she learns that Zinel is not at home and asks her son to call her and make her return. Meanwhile, Zinel has an idea to get Kolob to help them and be on their side. She tells her brother that what they are planning is risky, but if they succeed, they will take down Don Bengo. Kolob is shocked to see Zinla and asks what has happened. She reveals that she is one of the children who were disfigured. Bonga yells at Kolob and shows him the burns on his body. Zinli calms Kolob and tells him what happened to them. She explains that their third sibling died of liver cancer because of the experiments and that they escaped the fire but never recovered from what was done to them. She shows him her face. Kolob apologizes to them but refuses to help and expose Don Bengo. Bonga breaks down, leaves the room crying, and Zinle comforts him with a hug. She continues talking to Kolob, reminding him that he used to help them when they were children and that he was like a father to them them in the place where they were imprisoned. She asks him to do the right thing and help them achieve justice. However, Kolob remains adamant. At this moment, Endo calls Zinle, tells her that his family plans to pin the blame on Kolob. Zinle is pleased and quickly shows Kolob the news. Kolob is shocked and finally agrees to help them. He calls Grace, who convinces him to take the blame, assuring him that they will protect him and keep him out of jail. The next day, Kolob goes to his house to collect the documents incriminating Don Bengo and plans to reveal them at the press conference. However, he doesn't make it inside because Don Bengo's guard kidnaps him. Sensing something is wrong, Zinle quickly leaves the conference with her brother, following Don Bengo. They are horrified to see Don Bengo killing Kolob. It turns out this was his plan all along, to get rid of Kolob, make him take the blame. Fila announces at the conference that Kolob fled after what he did. Zinle falls asleep in the car with her brother, dreaming about the day of the fire, and wakes up startled. She quickly gets out of the car to catch her breath and tells Bonga that she needs to return to the mansion immediately. Bonga is worried for her safety and suggests that Don Bengo might have seen her, but Zinle is certain. She refuses her brother's suggestion to go to the police, saying they don't have any evidence. Bonga asks her to forget the past and move on with their lives, because what they are doing won't bring their sister back. Zinle replies that at least they should get justice for her, so she didn't die in vain. She asks him to take her home, and Bonga reluctantly agrees. Grace seizes the opportunity to mend her relationship with her husband and return things to how they were before. The next day, they inform their children that Kolob committed suicide, left a note exonerating them from his actions. But Fila doesn't believe them because he knows they are lying. Endo is shocked when he sees the news and yells at his family, deciding to leave the house. He asks Zinle to come with him, but she refuses, tells him to report his family if he suspects them, instead of running away. She then closes the door in his face. Fila tries to convince his brother to stay, reconsider, but Endo is determined, hugs Fila, and leaves. Zinle watches him and breaks down crying. The next day, Zinle sees Grace and Don Bengo kissing in the office after what they did to Kolob. She recalls what happened to her and her siblings and struggles to breathe, but composes herself. Grace asks her where she was during the press conference, and Zinle says she was sick because she couldn't handle the stress. Grace reminds her that she is the face of the company and threatens to fire her if she loses focus again. Zinle leaves and encounters Don Bengo, who harasses her. She feels very uncomfortable, but comes up with an idea to make Don Bengo fall in love with her and use it to drive a wedge between him and his wife. She calls her brother to share her plan, but Bonga refuses and says he will go to the police. Zinle decides to go ahead with her plan anyway. She sends a message to Thando, pretending to be devastated by her breakup with Endo, and asks her to go out and talk. Zinle's real goal is to learn how to make Don Bengo fall for her. She asks Thando why she married Don Bengo. Thando explains that Don Bengo wanted someone opposite of Grace, someone weak who could bear him many children, but she wasn't like that, which is why they divorced. Zinle returns home and goes to Don Bengo's office, giving him a bottle of whiskey as a gift. She leaves the office. She finds Grace standing in front of her and asks what she is doing. Zinle lies, saying the maid wasn't available, so she delivered the bottle to Don Bengo herself. Don Bengo is impressed by Zinle and tries to get closer to her while she is exercising. He asks about her relationship with Endo. She says their relationship was just beginning, that they both wanted different things. She wanted to marry and have children. Don Bengo is very pleased with this. Grace sees them and becomes suspicious. Zinle is terrified when she comes out of the bathroom and finds Grace there. Remembering her scar, she tries to hide it until Grace leaves. At dinner, Grace suggests that Zinle get to know her son's friend and tells her that she considers her like a daughter. Meanwhile, Linda decides to find out who recorded the video. She meets her friend who organized the party and learns that no one could enter without a code. Linda's friend recalls that a girl managed to get in without knowing the entry code and disappeared for a long time. She tells Linda that the girl's name is Vi, the same girl Bonga sent to record Linda. Bonga calls his sister, saying he can't forget what happened with Kolob. He refuses to let her continue with her plan, reminding her that they agreed she wouldn't get involved with Don Bengo. However, Zinle is convinced of her plan. After the photo shoot, Don Bengo's assistant asks her to meet him. Zinle goes to the same apartment where he used to meet Ruby. Don Bengo gives her a diamond bracelet as a gift, tries to get close to her. Zinle pretends to be shocked, saying she never imagined he would see her as cheap and think he could buy her with a bracelet. She leaves him and walks away. At the same time, Grace sees the bracelet's receipt and thinks her husband bought it for her as an anniversary gift. She's shocked when she sees the bracelet on Zinle's wrist. Zinle lies, saying that her husband tried to flirt with her and she didn't know how to tell her. Grace pushes Zinl into the swimming pool and throws her out. Linda meets with Vi, asking her who let her into the party. Vi refuses to talk but gets scared when Linda threatens her family. Vi decides to confess about Bonga. Meanwhile, Bonga decides to go to the police and asks to be introduced to a trustworthy investigator, as he used to work with the police. He insists on speaking to someone who isn't corrupt. Zinl seizes the opportunity when Don Bengo returns home and pretends to be distressed, crying in front of him. She tells him that she genuinely has feelings for him, but wants to marry him and have children. Don Bengo agrees and tells his wife that he will marry Zinla. Fila is furious, calling his father insane. Don Bengo slaps him and tells Grace he had warned her that he would marry again and have more children. Bonga meets with the investigator, telling him what happened with Kolob and that Don Bengo killed him. Zinl attends a photo shoot where she's supposed to be hanging from ropes. Grace arrives at the session and instructs the person in charge of the ropes to cut them. Grace watches from a distance and then leaves. Zinl later meets Thando and tells her that Don Bengo wants to marry her. She can't refuse. Thando tries to stop her and decides to reveal what Grace did to her. Zinl asks for water to set up a recording. Zinla records Thando as she reveals that Grace caused her miscarriage. Zinli plays the recording for Don Bengo, who becomes furious with Grace and throws her out of the house. Grace is shocked, saying he can't throw her out and reminding him of what she knows about him. She tells him that she made him who he is. Don Bengo retorts that he also knows dangerous things about her. Grace warns him that he can't win this war, leaves with her son. Don Bengo tries to get Fila to stay with him, but Fila refuses and tells him to find another puppet CEO. Zinli is very pleased as she watches the family fall apart. Don Bengo is upset because of the scandalous news being published about it. To counteract this, he decides to marry Zinla by the end of the week to publicize their marriage and restore his reputation. Zinle is shocked because marrying him wasn't part of her plan. Meanwhile, Fila blames his mother for what she did to Thando. Grace explains that she wanted his father to suffer because of his multiple marriages. Fila tells his mother she should apologize to Thando or else she will end up alone. Linda is surprised when she hears about her father's marriage to Zinl, which makes her even more suspicious. She wants to warn her father but can't reach him. The next day, Zinl tries to delay the wedding by telling Don Bengo that the marriage procedures will take 3 months, which would be a good time for them to get to know each other. Don Bengo insists that they will get to know each other after marriage. Zinle is nervous when Don Bengo puts the wedding ring on her finger. Meanwhile, Grace and her son visit Thando to apologize. Thando breaks down and leaves them to enter her room. Linda argues with them after learning that Grace caused Thando's miscarriage and throws Grace out of the house. Zinli feels scared while taking wedding photos with Don Bengo. After the photo shoot, she calls her brother, informing him that Don Bengo wants to marry her by the end of the week. Bonga gets angry and says that instead of making Don Bengo suffer, they are the ones suffering. Zinli reassures him, saying she will find a plan. She then gets an idea. After ending the call with Bonga, Linda's friend contacts him, lying that Vi is in danger and needs his help. Linda managed to find his number and name, and she just needs to catch him. Don Bengo takes Zinl out, sensing her nervousness. Zinl tells him she isn't used to the clothes she's wearing. She executes her plan by telling Don Bengo that she wants to attend a spiritual session because she's having a tough time, especially after what Grace did to her, causing her to have nightmares. Don Bengo agrees immediately and attends the session with her. The medium asks Zinl to leave so she can speak to Don Bengo alone. It's revealed that Zinl arranged this to make Don Bengo confess his actions while being recorded. However, Don Bengo refuses to say anything and leaves the session. Meanwhile, Bonga goes to the location given by Linda's friend and calls her, realizing it's a trap. The friend lies, saying Vi passed out due to drugs. Bonga quickly realizes Vi doesn't do drugs and hangs up. Linda is frustrated, feeling her only lead is lost, but is encouraged when Thando suggests tracking Bonga's number to find his address. Don Bengo is upset because of the scandalous news being published about him. To counteract this, he decides to marry Zinl by the end of the week to publicize their marriage and restore his reputation. Zinli is shocked because marrying him wasn't part of her plan. Meanwhile, Fila blames his mother for what she did to Thando. Grace explains that she wanted his father to suffer because of his multiple marriages. Fila tells his mother she should apologize to Thando or else she will end up alone. Linda is surprised when she hears about her father's marriage to Zinla, which makes her even more suspicious. She wants to warn her father but can't reach him. The next day, Zinla tries to delay the wedding by telling Don Bengo that the marriage procedure procedures will take 3 months, which would be a good time for them to get to know each other. Don Bengo insists that they will get to know each other after marriage. Zinl is nervous when Don Bengo puts the wedding ring on her finger. Meanwhile, Grace and her son visit Thondo to apologize. Thondo breaks down and leaves them to enter her room. Linda argues with them after learning that Grace caused Thondo's miscarriage and throws Grace out of the house. Zinl feels scared while taking wedding photos with Don Bengo. After the photo shoot, she calls her brother, informing him that Don Bengo wants to marry her by the end of the week. Bonga gets angry and says that instead of making Don Bengo suffer, they are the ones suffering. Zinl reassures him, saying she will find a plan. She then gets an idea. After ending the call with Bonga, Linda's friend contacts him, lying that Vi is in danger and needs his help. Linda managed to find his number and name, and she just needs to catch him. Don Bengo takes Zinle out, sensing her nervousness. Zinli tells him she isn't used to the clothes she's wearing. She executes her plan by telling Don Bengo that she wants to attend a spiritual session because she's having a tough time, especially after what Grace did to her, causing her to have nightmares. Don Bengo agrees immediately and attends the session with her. The medium asks Zinli to leave so she can speak to Don Bengo alone. It's revealed that Zinli arranged this to make Don Bengo confess his actions while being recorded. However, Don Bengo refuses to say anything and leaves the session. Meanwhile, Bonga goes to the location given by Linda's friend and calls her, realizing it's a trap. The friend lies, saying Vi passed out due to drugs. Bonga quickly realizes Vi doesn't do drugs and hangs up. Linda is frustrated, feeling her only lead is lost, but is encouraged when Thondo suggests tracking Bonga's number to find his address. When Don Bengo returns home, he asks the medium to visit him. She tells him that there is a spirit seeking revenge on him and that she can't tell if it's from the material world or not. She gives him a strong drink to protect him from evil spirits. Don Bengo feels reassured and asks Zinle to prepare for the wedding. Bonga calls her and informs her that he has reported everything to the police and trusts the officer he spoke to. The next day, Bonga meets the investigator and is terrified to discover that he is corrupt. The investigator tells him to keep quiet about what he saw. Bonga sends a message to his sister, informing her of what happened, but Zinle doesn't see it because her phone battery is dead. The investigator contacts Don Bengo and informs him. At the same time, Linda finds Bonga's address. Bonga is shocked to find Don Bengo waiting for him at his house with a gun. He reveals that he is one of the children who were experimented on. Don Bengo, scared, pretends to be remorseful, saying he was trying to forget in any way possible. Bonga hesitates, and Don Bengo takes the gun from him. We hear a gunshot. At this moment, Zinl is trying on her wedding dress. When her phone charges, she listens to her brother's message and panics. She quickly changes her clothes to go to him. Don Bengo leaves the house after shooting Bonga, and his daughter sees him as she arrives home. She asks him what he is doing. He ignores her and leaves quickly. Zinl tries to call her brother, but he doesn't answer. Grace decides to take over the company from her husband. She meets with the board members, convincing them that Don Bengo is insane, evidenced by firing 2 CEOs in less than a month, his numerous marriages, and showing them his medical records. She tells them that his condition is worsening, that it's time to save the company by choosing a new leader, implying that she should be the one. Zinla arrives at her brother's house, is shocked to find him injured, tells her that Don Bengo shot him. Zinle decides to take him in the car herself, fearing the ambulance might take too long. Bonga apologizes, explaining that the investigator told Don Bengo, but assures her he didn't reveal her involvement. Zinla tries to keep her brother awake until they reach the hospital, but Bonga dies on the way. Zinla breaks down, crying. Meanwhile, Linda goes to her father's house, trying to convince him that Zinli is behind everything, but he doesn't believe her, throws her out. Zinla returns home, gets dressed nicely after sending all the servants away, and makes Don Bengo drink the potion that supposedly wards off evil spirits. Don Bengo drinks it all, and suddenly falls ill, struggling to breathe. Don Bengo asks Zinle to call an ambulance, but she refuses. She points a gun at him and tells him that she is the one who did this to him. She wipes off the makeup on her face and reveals that she is one of the children he disfigured. She forces him to record a video confession of everything he did to them. Don Bengo tries to blame Grace, saying she planned everything, but Zinla doesn't believe him, makes him confess. She then tells him that he won't die and that his condition is due to the drugs she put in his drink. She says she won't kill him because she's not like him. Don Bengo gets angry and tries to attack her, but Zinla pushes him. He accidentally hits his head and falls to the ground. Zinla panics, thinking he is dead. She wraps him in a carpet and drags him to the car. That moment, Endo arrives home. Zinli is terrified he will discover what she has done. Just then, Don Bengo opens his eyes and starts to regain consciousness.